Recently, I bought an Alesis Strike module, and some of the kits in that module sound pretty great. The first preset on the most recent software version, the Big Bird kit, is the kind of kit I'd quite like to have on my Roland TD-50X, so let's see what we can do. The most recent generation of Roland modules can import samples, but it can't import multi-layer samples, and that's what this kit is made of. What it can do is import one-shot samples and layer them over the internal sounds of the Roland module. So I'm going to need to take individual samples of each drum and cymbal in that Alesis kit and sort of Frankenstein it back together, making new instruments using layering and modelling in the Roland module. Fortunately, getting the samples off the Strike module is actually pretty simple. If you hook it up to the computer, it pops up as a removable drive. So as you can see here, this drive is the onboard storage and this drive is the SD card. So in the onboard storage, inside the samples folder, you can find all of the samples. So here are the Big Bird ones. I'm going to use Reaper's media browser to quickly preview all of the samples. So go through into the samples folder and then we'll go into the Big Bird kick. And there we are, that's all the kick drums there. So I'll have a quick listen and see which one I like the sound of the most. It's probably going to be the top velocity for the kick. Yeah, cool. So if I go back through into the snare drum, and then down to the rim shots. That's a pretty pingy rim shot. So if I move on to the toms. Okay. I'll just go with the top ones for these, I quite like them. Okay, so I'm going to export all these and then I can put them on my SD card and load them into the TD-50X. I've set up both modules and I'm routing the audio from the Alesis Strike into the TD-50X's mix import. All of the triggers are hooked up to the TD-50X module, but I'm sending the MIDI out of the TD-50X into the Alesis Strike. And if I want to turn off the onboard audio of the TD-50X, I can go into Setup, MIDI and turn local control off. So I want to try and take the Roland kit from this to something much more like this. I've loaded all of the Alesis samples onto the TD-50X and I've placed them on the sublayer with a fade function so that they blend in as you go up in dynamics. So if I turn them all on now, this is how it sounds. It sounds awful because the volumes are all over the place and I haven't done anything with the Roland instruments underneath the samples. So I'll just make some tweaks to the volumes. All of the samples also have quite a lot of noise on them, so I'm going to use the decay setting to trim the ends off. So I'm going to start off with the snare drum and I'm going to listen to the Alesis sample and hear how it sounds like one instrument from the bottom to the top and try to replicate that. Okay, the Roland snare. I'll see if I can do better. So this bronze alloy snare doesn't really sound like the Alesis sample, however the transition from low to top feels a bit more authentic than the other snares. I'm going to use the transient controls to soften the ghost notes, and I'm going to fade the sample in a bit later because I can feel the attack coming through a bit too quickly. Alright, let's check the original sample. They're quite different, but it feels like a nice progression on this module, so I'm going to stick with that. However, there seems to be a lot more ambience on the sample now that I've imported it into the Roland, so I'm going to find out what's going on there. Alright, okay, so they've used the decay setting on the Alesis module to reduce that ambience. Let's see if I can replicate that. So that's the same decay value, but it feels like it's now cutting the ambience off too soon. That feels closer to the right length, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use the transients to kind of dip the decay a bit earlier. Okay, on to the kick. Alesis sample. Roland. No. I'm going to muffle it because the Alesis sample is very short. Maybe it's tuned up a bit more. I don't really think it needs to be the large one, but I kind of like it. Moving on to the toms, these are a bit more awkward because you've really got to get the tunings right. Alesis Tom 1. Roland. I'm going to go back to those bird's eye maples. There's a pitch bend in the Alesis sample that I want to try and replicate. A bit more attack. There aren't any rim shots on these tom samples either, so I'm going to listen to the Roland one, find out sort of what the difference in the pitch is, and adjust the Alesis sample on the rim to try and match it. Tom 2. Floor tom 1. Close. I'm also going to give it some release because I feel like I want the sustain to last a bit longer. Oh, there it is. Now I know that the second floor tom is just a pitched down version of the first floor tom because there's only 3 toms in the Alesis samples. It's tuned down by 3 semitones. In Roland speak, that's 300 on the pad pitch option. So I'm just going to copy across tom 3 to tom 4 and then tune down both the Roland and the Alesis samples. Alesis floor toms and Roland floor toms. Okay, crashes. Alesis crash. Roland crash. I think the warm medium thin. But I just need to make some tweaks. Give it a low cut. And let's have a listen. Together. I'll fade it in a little bit later because it feels like it comes in a bit too early with all that attack. It's more natural. And there aren't any bow samples on the Alesis crashes, so I'm going to use the transients and maybe the pitching to try and recreate them myself and make them feel a bit more organic. Okay, same on crash 2. Okay, ride cymbal. Straight away, I don't like how on the Alesis sample, the edge doesn't feel like a wash, it's a bit more of a sort of ping. So again, I'll use the transients to dial that out. Okay, China. Quite attacky, so I'll take some attack off the edge and leave it as it is on the bow. The hi-hat is the only instrument that I couldn't use samples for because there's no pedal control option on the Roland user samples, so it would have been far too limited. So I'm just going to have to make one out of stock sounds and see how close I can get it. Okay, let's put a room on it. Whew. That seems a bit more like it. There's a bit of a nasty frequency in the snare. And let's give it a little more top end. I'm going to go really light on the compression because I just want to glue the sample and the Roland sound together. I'm just going to see if there are any master effects applied on the Alesis kit. So there's no reverb, there's no compression, but there is some EQ that all of the pads are going to. They've added 3 decibels to the low frequencies at 86 Hz and 1 decibel to the high frequencies at 11.3 kHz. So I'll replicate that on the Roland module and see how that sounds. Alright, so I'll just make some final volume tweaks and then we'll compare the kits.